The room smelled like burnt coffee and cold ambition. It was 7:46 p.m. on a Thursday, and I was the last one in the conference room besides Tanya. Her stilettos clicked across the fake wood laminate like a metronome of impatience, and the overhead fluorescent lights buzzed as if they were as fed up as I was. She leaned over my shoulder, finger jabbing at the screen like she was swiping on Tinder, not finalizing a demo for $100 million pitch. Just cut it, she snapped. That compliance check slows the whole thing down. I blinked, it's mandatory. She smiled like a pageant contestant with a knife behind her back. Then she leaned in, close enough I could smell her lavender dry shampoo and stress sweat, and whispered, SHH, compliance is flexible. Just keep it quiet, okay? And there it was, the phrase. 5 little words that felt like a crowbar, prying the lid off a coffin I'd nailed shut a dozen times before. I'd heard her say a version of it before, in elevators, over cocktails with vendors, in Slack messages that somehow disappeared. But tonight, with that $1 million smirk and that fake casual tone, it hit different. Because this time I knew she meant it. Now, before we go further, quick thing, about 90% of people listen to stories like this without subscribing. Crazy, right? If this kind of real-world madness and quiet revenge hits the spot for you, hit that like button and subscribe. It seriously keeps our team going, and trust me, this one's worth the ride. Anyway, back to Tanya and her dumpster fire ethics. I didn't say anything. I just saved the file, minimized the window, and nodded. Sure, I said, voice flat as a dead spreadsheet. She clapped her hands like I'd just solved world hunger and strutted out. Already on her phone, probably scheduling a post about disruptive leadership with a photo of herself in that red blazer she wore like armor. I sat there a minute longer, staring at the frozen screen. SHH, compliance is flexible. I'd been at this company for 12 years, long enough to remember when we still filed vendor agreements in manila folders, long enough to watch 3 CEOs come and go, all with the same golden parachute and the same visionary buzzwords. I wasn't flashy. I didn't play office politics or join the yoga at lunch crowd. I just kept the paperwork tight, the logs consistent, and the auditors out of our hair. I was wallpaper. I was dependable. I was invisible. And that's why Tanya thought she could get away with it. She'd been brought in from some consulting firm with a shiny resume and a blinding smile. Within 6 months, she'd installed her own little inner circle, the Tanya Talons. We called them, all teeth and back channeling, treating policy like a mood board. She had a way of steamrolling compliance like it was a decorative suggestion, not a federal requirement. Normally, I'd document her little flexible moments, send a quiet ping to legal, and move on. But this time, something in me snapped. Maybe it was the way she touched my screen like I wasn't even there. Maybe it was that smug whisper, like we were co-conspirators in a harmless little secret. Or maybe I was just tired of watching people like her treat rules like a dress code they could accessorize. So I pulled out my phone, not flashy, not illegal, Ohio's a one-party state. I scrolled back through the meeting's audio log on my company-issued laptop, found the right timestamp, and quietly hit record. SHH, compliance is flexible. Just keep it quiet, okay? I saved it, exported it, dropped it into a folder I'd labeled admin notes because no one ever clicks on those. Then I sent it to myself. And then, after a minute of staring at the blinking cursor in Outlook, I forwarded it to one person. Legal. Subject line for record keeping. Timestamp 3714. No explanation. No accusation. Just the facts, ma'am. I didn't expect anything. Legal usually responded slower than molasses in January, and even then, it was always with a heavy sigh and a CYA disclaimer. But this time, I got a reply in under 10 minutes. Understood. Logged. That was it. And I knew right then that someone else had also heard the crowbar cracking open the coffin. I shut down for the night, grabbed my coat, and stepped into the parking garage. The air was cold. The kind of cold that makes your bones feel brittle. I stood by my car for a moment, watching Tanya's Tesla zip past, her taillights glowing like the eyes of a demon that thought she was untouchable. Let her think that. I got in, turned the key, and let the engine hum. The radio flicked on, some talk show about investing during a recession. I didn't listen. I just sat there with my hands on the wheel, breathing. I didn't want to destroy her, not yet, but I would watch. And I would wait, because I may be quiet, but I never forget. The next morning, Tanya was already pacing the war room by 8:03 a.m., double-fisting a green smoothie and a Starbucks latte like she was auditioning for CEO of Chaos. The rest of us filed in like soldiers reporting for duty, me, 2 product managers, the lead UX designer, and poor Sanjay from DevOps, who looked like he'd slept in his hoodie. Probably had. We're cutting the check gate, Tanya announced, like she was declaring war on process itself. It's a minor compliance step, not mission critical. We need the demo functional by Friday. Sanjay blinked. The gate's tied to the data masking protocol. If we cut it, we can't verify it's a demo. Tanya cut in. Fake data. No one's getting sued. Don't overthink it. Her eyes briefly landed on me, daring me to challenge her. I didn't take the bait. Not there. Not yet. Instead, I scribbled in my notepad. An actual spiral-bound notepad because I'm old school like that, and made a tiny star next to the decision. That's how I marked things that needed a second look. I had a system. My own quiet firewall. Later that afternoon, I pulled Sanjay aside in the break room while the Keurig wheezed out something that legally couldn't be called coffee. She push you to skip the check gate, I asked. He nodded slowly, rubbing his temples. I logged it. Slack threads archived. She told me to delete the Jira comment. Did you? He hesitated. Not yet, don't. He gave me a look, then just whispered, okay, and left. That night, back at my desk after most of the floor had cleared out, I did what I always did when something smelled off. I opened up the audio file of the morning meeting. Yes, I record all team sessions. Everyone knows it's policy. People forget when they're comfortable. At 37 minutes and 14 seconds, I heard her say it again. It's just a shortcut. Don't overthink it. Same dismissive tone. Same sparkle of self-satisfaction in her voice that made my jaw clench. It wasn't just the words, it was the pattern, the repetition. She didn't think she was breaking rules, she thought she was the rule. I clipped the audio, exported it, saved it under a boring file name no one would open. Q3 internal notes audio section BWAV. Then I wrote a short email to internal counsel. No flourish, no accusations, just the line I'd used before for record keeping. Timestamp 37:14, I hit send, watched it disappear into the void, then I sat there, staring at the empty inbox like it owed me a reason. Here's the thing no one tells you about being in compliance. You're always walking a tightrope between two cliffs. One is labeled loyalty, the other liability. Fall off either side, and someone's going to pretend they never knew you, especially when things go sideways. Tanya wasn't stupid. She knew exactly how far she could push things, just enough to get results, not enough to leave fingerprints. But this time, she wasn't just flirting with fire. She was bottling it, putting a bow on it, and promising it to a $100M client as if it wouldn't burn the whole building down. I'd spent years being the quiet one, the fixer, one who smoothed the bumps and patched the paper trails. But this wasn't a bump, it was a crater, and I wasn't going to be the one left holding the bag when the auditors came knocking. Still, part of me hesitated. Not out of fear, I knew how to cover my bases, but out of some outdated, rusted sense of loyalty. Tanya had promoted me once, gave me a raise that helped me pay off my sister's hospital bills, back when she still respected the system, before her ambition got rabid. That's what made this harder, but not impossible. Later that evening, I passed her in the parking garage. She was laughing into her Bluetooth earpiece, already halfway into some buzzword salad about disruption culture and scaling lean. She didn't even glance at me. Good. She still thought I was invisible. She didn't know I'd saved every compliance checklist she'd marked optional. She didn't know I'd downloaded logs from every deleted Slack message she sent at 2 a.m. She didn't know I'd started a folder titled, If Needed, I Didn't Want War. But I wasn't going to be her human shield either. So I went home, microwaved leftover lasagna, and turned on an old episode of Columbo. And as I watched the detective peel back layers of arrogance with a smile and a pause, I found myself smiling too. Because just like Columbo, I didn't need to rush, I already had the cigar lit. Tanya won the internal vote, of course. The big pitch, $100 million in potential contracts, a commercial arm of a defense contractor, the kind of client that makes or breaks fiscal quarters, was now her baby. She delivered the news with the energy of a woman who'd already picked out her corner office view and framed her future Forbes article. I just smiled, nodded, and kept typing. Let her win. Let her bask in the spotlight she thinks she earned, while someone else did the stitching that kept the floor from collapsing beneath her stilettos. She wanted the glory, fine. I wanted the audit logs, and I already had them. She didn't notice I was no longer advising her, just observing. She'd loop me in on calls with a chirpy, can you just sit in and take notes? Like I was her personal court stenographer. Her voice bounced off the Zoom walls like a motivational speaker hopped up on espresso and delusion. Buzzwords poured out like a TED talk got trapped in a blender, agility, scalability, efficiency-driven compliance culture. But her eyes never met mine anymore. She knew. Somewhere deep down, she knew I wasn't on the ride with her anymore. But she also knew she couldn't shake me, not before the pitch, not without questions, so we danced. Meanwhile, Legal's reply to the second recording landed with the same eerie chill as the first. Understood, logged, that was all. I stared at it for a solid 5 minutes trying to read between the lines like there was a secret message hidden in the punctuation. Nothing, no warmth, no outrage, just logged like a time bomb in a file cabinet. So I did what I do best. I prepped. I pulled logs. I started a private mirror of Tanya's project folder, backup copy of everything she edited, deleted, or shared with her inner circle. I automated the download with a simple script that mirrored changes every evening to an encrypted thumb drive. Nothing illegal, just thorough, like a squirrel building a winter cache. Except my acorns were audit trails. At night, in the silence of my living room, I watched the pieces move. First, Tanya deleted a warning email from a compliance analyst, flagged it as not applicable, and then moved the thread to her pitch support folder. Next, she created a new Jira ticket that skipped the standard approval flow, marked it high priority, assigned it to a junior dev who just started 3 weeks ago and didn't know how to say no. Then she did something subtle. She renamed a policy document, one that outlines security compliance for client-facing demos, with a new version number. Stripped out 3 entire sections and left no change log. If I hadn't compared the SHA hashes from 2 days apart, I'd have missed it, but I caught it and I logged it. Everything went into a folder on my home desktop named Coffee Grounds, because that's what she left behind, a residue of arrogance always at the bottom of her cup. One night I rewatched the first clip. The whisper, SHH, compliance is flexible, just keep it quiet, okay? Her voice was almost playful, almost sweet. I paused the video on her face, smiling, confident. I imagined her practicing that smile in the mirror before meetings. The same mirror she probably used to tell herself she was a visionary, that her rules didn't apply because she moved faster than the system. The more I watched, the calmer I got. This wasn't a grudge. It wasn't bitterness. It was alignment, because somewhere between the deleted logs and the polished presentation decks, Tanya had stopped leading. She'd started staging, and I'd stopped hoping she'd listen. I kept showing up to meetings, kept nodding, kept my voice flat and agreeable. The more invisible I seemed, the more reckless she became, like a magician who assumes the audience is too dazzled to spot the trapdoor. I saw the trapdoor. I was just waiting for her to fall through it. One night I got a text from Sanjay. Just a single line, she told me not to run the checksum validator. Is that okay? I stared at it, then replied, keep a copy of that thread, archive everything. Don't argue, he didn't ask questions. He didn't have to. By the end of that week, Tanya had shaved 3 days off the demo delivery timeline by skipping 2 mandatory controls and quietly reclassifying the client as internal pilot, which was absurd. But she knew it would slide, until someone questioned it, and no one would, except me. But I wouldn't do it out loud, not yet, because I didn't need to stop her. That would only make me a target. I just needed to make sure the right people were looking when the floor gave out. Tanya's voice was shrill with urgency that Monday morning, like she'd just chugged battery acid and inspiration quotes. We're already 2 days behind. We cannot afford to look slow in front of the client. She barked into the war room mic, pacing in front of the screen like a substitute teacher trying to control a classroom she knew she'd lost. She turned to the IT lead, Derek, a guy who wore sarcasm like cologne and had more patience for failing servers than for management speak. I need you to disable the security hold on build 14.6. He looked up from his laptop like she'd just asked him to operate on a squirrel with a butter knife. That's not a toggle, Tanya. That's tied to credential expiration and session logging. It's not just a checkbox. Tanya smiled that tight botox smirk of hers, then uncheck whatever's in the way. The client isn't buying protocols, they're buying speed. She didn't even glance at me, but I felt the heat of her words like someone had opened a furnace behind my chair. Derek leaned back, exhaled. You want that in writing? Just do it. We're covered under demo leniency. Covered by what, exactly? A hallucinated clause from her imaginary playbook. She turned back to the screen and began outlining our agile compliance framework to the team, a nonsense phrase she invented last week that now came with diagrams. She described it like it was company policy, tossing out lines like we prioritize velocity over bureaucracy, and our integrity is in our intent, not our process. Even the interns looked confused. I kept my face neutral, fingers dancing over the keyboard, but I wasn't taking meeting notes. I was copying the email thread where she'd asked Derek to just disable the annoying logging layer. I tagged the metadata, archived the attachments, and saved it to my private folder titled, If Needed. That folder had grown fat. Inside it now lived 3 audio clips of Tanya dismissing compliance protocols as legacy baggage, a screenshot of her changing a document classification tag from external use prohibited to client share approved at 2:14 a.m., a draft email she deleted, but not before I caught it in version history, asking the design team to retrofit documentation post-demo. Her digital fingerprints were everywhere. All I had to do was hold the light up. And still, legal said nothing. Until they did. It was Tuesday. My calendar pinged with a 5-minute informal check-in request from William Chang, our general counsel. I'd spoken to him maybe 4 times in my entire tenure, and each time was about as warm as a polar bear in tax season. The meeting was on Zoom. He didn't waste time. Was the phrase compliance is flexible used in a group setting? I paused. Yes. Multiple times, I nodded. He looked down, typed something. Thank you. That's all for now. Click. Meeting over. I just sat there, blinking at my own reflection in the dark screen, heart racing in a quiet, satisfied way, like watching the first ripple in a pond after you've skipped the stone. Tanya didn't slow down. If anything, she ramped up. She started using flexible compliance like it was our new branding. Dropped it in every third sentence. Said it on vendor calls. Slipped it into a deck slide under the heading Streamlined Governance. I wondered if she practiced it in the mirror, or if the delusion had just fermented naturally. I said nothing, just nodded when spoken to, sent summaries when asked, pretended not to notice when she started removing my name from calendar invites and documents. But I noticed, I always noticed. During one particularly nauseating call with a vendor partner, she wrapped the meeting with, "We like to stay nimble on compliance. It's more of a guidepost than a guardrail." A guidepost, like we were navigating policy with horoscopes and tea leaves. I hit record the second she said it. Saved the audio, tagged it. Later, when Sanjay pinged me asking if he should follow through on her order to hardcode demo credentials, a move that would have left us open to credential bleed, I simply replied, log your concern, forward to security, then do nothing. Won't she flip? She already has, just stay still. The storm was swirling now, but I wasn't in the wind. I was in the eye. The weirdest part? I wasn't even angry anymore. The disgust had calcified into something colder, like watching termites eat through drywall. You don't yell at them, you just wait for the wall to cave and act surprised. Tanya thought she was invincible, but every lie she told was timestamped, every shortcut logged, every buzzword-laced detour annotated and filed. She was digging her own grave, and I was just making sure the coordinates were accurate. Compliance wasn't a buzzword. It was a clock, and Tanya had no idea hers was ticking. The moment the pitch was confirmed, Tanya went into full-on queen bee mode. Her office door stayed propped open like a throne room, her voice echoing down the hallway as she barked orders and dropped phrases like client-ready polish and crucial visibility alignment. People started calling the upcoming presentation the big one, like it was a Vegas prize fight or a hurricane. The client was a commercial division of a Fortune 500 defense contractor, the kind of client that doesn't just boost Q3 revenue, but gives your company its own line item in Forbes. Government adjacent, regulated, watched, which made Tanya's behavior all the more surreal. We need to look fast, feel fast, be fast, she told the prep team. What they want is speed and confidence. Process is fine, but speed closes deals. She was glowing, literally. I think she'd had her teeth whitened and her buttocks topped up. Her hair gleamed like she was about to anchor the evening news. I was told very politely to sit in, take notes, but don't talk. The kind of instruction you give to a tape recorder, not a human being. I nodded, smiled, wrote tape recorder at the top of my notepad just to amuse myself. Legal was added to the call just to observe. William Chang, our general counsel, joined silently, camera off. Microphone muted. His little box sat in the corner of the screen like a security camera you forget is there until it blinks. The client joined with fanfare, 4 reps, one of them ex-military, all of them stiff-backed and expressionless. Tanya introduced the team, rattled off our credentials, and launched into the first slide deck like she was pitching a startup on Shark Tank. I sat quietly in the background, eyes on everyone and everything. Tanya was dazzling. I'll give her that. She had charm if you didn't look too closely. If you ignored the fact that 2/3 of her metrics were projections and the other third were numbers she'd massaged into relevance. 15 minutes in, she began the speed pitch. I know what you're thinking, she said, clicking to a slide labeled Delivery Acceleration Framework. Is your team this fast because they cut corners? A pause, then that smile. Well, not exactly, she purred. What we've done is develop a culture of flexible compliance. We meet the intent of regulations while removing the barriers that slow teams down. The room, digital though it was, went still. Even the ambient coughs and typing from the client's side seemed to freeze. Tanya mistook it for awe. She clicked to the next slide, but my eyes weren't on the deck. They were on William. His camera was still off, but I saw his name flicker, a soft indicator that he was active, typing, moving. Timestamp markers appeared on the shared Google Doc. He was cross-referencing in real time. My pulse spiked, but I didn't move. Tanya rolled right through the pitch, unaware that she'd just thrown a lit match into a dry haystack. Let me put it plainly, she said, still riding the high. Compliance is flexible when you understand the business goal. You can't let old systems block new growth. That was the one. William's icon lit up green, mic unmuted. Sorry, one moment, he said flatly. The words were simple, but the effect was seismic. Tanya froze mid-sentence. The clients leaned forward. Even the intern in the corner box adjusted his headphones like something big had just shifted and he didn't want to miss it. Tanya blinked, her mouth still slightly open. William's camera stayed off. His screen share began, a line of text on a pale background, highlighted in yellow. It was a direct quote, timestamped. Same phrase, verbatim, pulled from a prior call. This statement here, William said calmly. Can you clarify what regulatory framework you're referring to when you describe compliance as flexible? Tanya laughed. It was brittle, papery. Oh, that's just internal lingo. We mean flexible in the sense of being adaptive to client needs. Not in a, technical way. William replied. His screen stopped sharing. Thanks, please continue. And just like that, he muted again. The air didn't go back to normal. It thickened. Tanya stumbled through the next slide, voice a little higher than before, eyes darting across the screen. She knew. She didn't know what exactly, but she felt it, that invisible thread of control she'd been holding had just frayed. I sat perfectly still, watching the domino tip in slow motion, because I'd seen that phrase die before. The second it escaped her lips, it was over. She had crossed a line you don't come back from. Not with this client, not with that lawyer listening, and not with a folder titled, if needed, sitting quietly on my encrypted drive, now synced to the cloud. Adrenaline surged through me like a hidden power source. I kept my expression calm, pen moving steadily across my notebook. But inside, I felt the match hit the fuse, and I was ready. The moment the screen flashed James Hartley joined, every muscle in my body locked into place. James Hartley, our CEO. Not a hologram, not a forwarded memo. Live on this call, he didn't even turn on his camera at first. Just the audio, thick with tension and something sharper beneath like static wrapped around a razor blade. Please remain on the call, he said, voice flat, no greeting. Everyone else dropped now. There was a ripple of confusion. One client rep started to ask, is everything okay, before vanishing from the screen. One by one, the boxes disappeared. The PMs, interns, the project leads, gone. In the end, it was just four squares: Tanya, William from legal, myself, and the CEO. James finally turned on his camera. No background filter, no polished blur. Just a blank wall behind him and a look like he'd already had the worst day of his year, and now Tanya had decided to top it. He didn't look at me. Tanya, he said, calm as concrete, did you really say that? In this context, Tanya smiled, or tried to, but it was all gums and panic, like a ventriloquist dummy realizing she forgot her script. I think there's been a misunderstanding. No, William said, unmuting. There hasn't. And then, like a seasoned prosecutor lining up dominoes, William read it back. Her exact words: compliance is flexible. Remove the blockers. Our integrity is in our intent, not the process. He kept going. Every timestamp, every deleted thread, every quote that had lived inside the quiet vault of my folder was now emerging into the light, ushered forward with the cold precision of legal surgical steel. Tanya's face twisted. She shot me a glance, just a flicker, a millisecond, and I watched her realize. I'd known, I'd watched, I'd waited. She scrambled. We were told to move fast. This pitch was critical. Everyone was on board. James cut her off. No one told you to lie. Silence that followed could have split atoms. Tanya opened her mouth again, but nothing came out. Her camera feed trembled slightly, probably her hand shaking the laptop, but she didn't mute, didn't blink, didn't speak. James turned to William. What do we know about client risk exposure? William, minimal so far. We caught it before anything shipped. Thanks to, he didn't finish the sentence. He just looked directly into his camera, right at me, and gave the barest nod. I didn't return it. James continued, still ice. And internally, William, she bypassed multiple safeguards, lied to at least two departments. If the client had run a third-party scan on the build, we'd be explaining this to federal compliance instead of each other. Tanya tried one last swing. I was operating in good faith. The process was unclear. No, it wasn't, I said. The words left my mouth before I could think, but they didn't tremble. It landed like a dropped stone. James turned to me, surprised. You documented this? Yes. William added every change, every phrase, every deletion. Time-stamped and consistent, we verified. James leaned back just for a second. He exhaled hard through his nose, the kind of breath you take when you're trying very hard not to shout. Jesus Christ, he muttered. Then he leaned forward again. Tanya, effective immediately. You're on administrative leave pending investigation. Do not speak to any team members. Do not delete anything. Legal will coordinate your next steps. Tanya's mouth fell open, words stuttering behind her lips. James didn't wait for reply. Meeting adjourned. He clicked off. William lingered just long enough to say thank you, no smile, no flourish, just that. Then he disappeared too. I stared at my screen. Tanya was still there. Her face had gone pale, no makeup. No lighting trick, no corporate veneer left. Just panic, just silence. She whispered, you really did this. I said nothing. She stared for one more breath, then left the call, and I sat there, still, cold, hollow, not because I regretted anything, but because I knew this was only the beginning. The real avalanche hadn't even started yet, and I was the one who'd loosened the snow. It took less than 24 hours for Tanya's name to vanish. Her calendar was wiped. Her Slack status read inactive. The Tanya's weekly roundup emails stopped arriving in inboxes like gospel from on high. No company-wide announcement, no formal memo, just a hole like she'd been surgically removed from the system. But in her place, audit requests. They came in quietly, not as a storm but a tide. At first, just a handful of files from legal, then folders, then entire project histories. My inbox started filling with polite, carefully worded questions. Could I explain the folder naming conventions Tanya used for the demo builds? Did I recall when version 14.6 was branched? Had I noticed any metadata mismatches in the Jira log exports? I answered each one with precision and timestamps. No commentary, no victory laps, just clean, orderly truth. Then came the 3 p.m. invite, internal compliance debrief, small group, hosted by William. 5 attendees. I didn't recognize 2 of the names. I showed up with my laptop and my thumb drive. William greeted me with a nod and a post-it note already in hand. Start with folder if needed, so I did. For the next hour, I walked them through the full chain of negligence. The clips, the email headers, the policy edits, the version histories, the logs she thought no one tracked. I didn't editorialize, I didn't speculate. I showed them what was, not what I felt. At one point, a woman from finance stopped taking notes and just looked at me. You cataloged all of this? Yes. For how long? I hesitated. 6 months. She looked back down, writing again, only now slower, like she was processing a new kind of gravity. When it was over, William closed his laptop and leaned back. We'll be rewriting several process docs, he said. I'd like you to assist, quietly. If you're willing, I nodded. He added, your organization system. The way you log changes, that's exactly the kind of method we're lacking at the policy level. He said it like a compliment, but it didn't feel like one, not entirely. because none of this should have been necessary. And yet, here I was, becoming the blueprint, because the last blueprint had turned into a billboard for shortcuts. The next day, I was given access to the internal compliance drafts folder, something usually reserved for directors and above. No ceremony, no job title change. But when the new policy draft went out for review, my initials were in the footer. And then one night, the message came. It was late. I just turned off the kitchen light when my phone buzzed. Unknown number, but I knew it by heart. Tanya, you really did this? I stared at the screen, the tiny blinking cursor, like she was waiting. Like maybe there was still a version of the story where I'd say no, where I'd tell her someone else had pulled the thread, that I'd just watched it unravel. But I didn't type, because yes, I did do this, and no, I wasn't sorry. I turned the phone over, let the screen fade to black. Then I walked back into my office and reopened the policy draft. There was work to finish, and no one left to fake it. They didn't call it a promotion. They called it interim custodianship of the compliance function. HR's exact words, like they were afraid if they said director. Tanya's ghost might burst out of a ceiling vent screaming about synergy and brand integrity. I sat in the glass-walled office that used to be hers, still smelled like eucalyptus diffuser and ambition, while Marissa from HR delivered the news with the warmth of a DMV printer. No formal announcement yet, just a quiet transition, effective immediately. No applause, no balloons, no company-wide Slack message. Just the keycard permissions change. New inbox folder labeled leadership correspondence, and a silence that felt both respectful and mildly radioactive. Marissa slid the NDA across the table. I signed without blinking. A few hours later, as I gathered the printed audit logs for a final cross-check, a VP I'd barely spoken to before, finance, I think, stopped me in the hallway. He didn't even introduce himself. He just said, "You know, this company just avoided a federal compliance nightmare, right?" I nodded. He added, "You kept us safe." Then he walked away. It didn't feel like praise. It felt like someone handing me a fire hose after the fire and saying, "Good thing you were near the hydrant." By the end of the day, my face was still absent from the leadership portal, but my name had replaced Tanya's on the policy approval queue. Requests that used to CC her now arrived with my name in the to field, accompanied by a new tone, not friendly, not deferential, just cautious. It was a quiet crown, heavy, unadorned, and then came the final meeting. I hadn't planned to attend. It was labeled Reconciliation Review Legal and HR only. But my calendar updated late the night before, and my presence was suddenly requested. The boardroom was colder than usual, even though the AC hadn't changed. Tanya was already seated when I walked in, hair immaculate, jacket sharp, face carefully curated to project regret without surrender. She glanced at me not with malice but calculation, as if trying to determine how many of her remaining chips I held. William sat at the head of the table. 3 board members were present, along with HR and outside counsel. No fanfare, no introductions, they just launched right in. Tanya made her case, not with denial but with rebranding. She acknowledged aggressive execution, admitted misaligned urgency, even praised my attention to detail, calling it an unexpected asset that highlighted critical gaps in their oversight process. She was trying to spin it. To turn the iceberg she'd hid into proof, she was the only one willing to sail fast enough to find it. No one interrupted her. No one agreed with her. They just let her talk. Let her words pile up like sandbags in a flood. When she finished, there was a long pause. William looked to me. I said nothing, not out of fear, out of precision, because anything I said would dilute what was already obvious. Instead, I opened my laptop, typed in a file path, and turned the screen to face the room. A single document, titled Reinstated Policy Controls Q4 Revision. My initials were in the footer. Tanya's eyes locked on the screen. She knew. That was it. One board member closed his binder. Another said, "We've seen enough." Tanya sat very still. Her voice was gone. Mine was never needed. Later that evening, I sat at my desk, her old desk, and cleaned out the drawers. Behind a false panel, I found an old post-it curled at the edges. Her handwriting, sloppy, rushed, it read, "Cut where possible. Assume clean until flagged. Speed wins." I folded it in half, slid it into the shredder, and fed it through. Then I updated the internal wiki to reflect new documentation standards. No emojis, no quotes, just policy. And for the first time in years, the silence around compliance wasn't neglect. It was respect. They scheduled the town hall for a Thursday morning, which meant cameras on, business casual pajamas, and forced smiles from departments that still hadn't recovered from Q2 layoffs. 87 little rectangles lit up across the screen: marketing, product, sales, tech, legal, all of us floating in the silent, jittery soup of corporate Zoom. James Hartley, the CEO, appeared dead center, tireless but serious, sleeves rolled up like he'd done a hard day's work recently. Maybe he had. Maybe this counted. He opened with numbers, performance metrics, client acquisition, 2 vague mentions of market volatility and operational recalibration. Kind of verbal wallpaper that fills time while everyone scrolls Slack under the table. Then he shifted. "I want to take a moment," he said, "to address recent events involving our compliance practices." Every face stopped moving. Even the fake smiles froze. He continued. We have taken swift action to ensure this company never again places its integrity second to convenience. We've revised procedures. We've reassigned leadership. Then he paused, not dramatically, but heavily, like a stone being placed, not thrown. And I'll say this as clearly as I can: if you hear someone say compliance is flexible, report it immediately. No flair, no dramatic music, just that. Then he added, we've seen what that thinking can cost. He didn't say her name, he didn't have to. My video was on. I sat in the same chair I always did, same soft blue sweater, same old mug just off screen. Nothing about me had changed, except now the silence that followed landed squarely on my square. Someone clapped. It started small, awkward. A slow stutter of virtual applause reactions and two actual people physically clapping like they forgot where they were, then more. The screen pulsed with little cartoon hands. I didn't smile. I didn't wave. I just nodded once. No performance, no basking. I wasn't the hero of some company comeback story. I was the reason the story didn't become a scandal. James continued on, HR updates, new policies, something about a wellness stipend for Q4. But the moment had already passed through everyone's bloodstream. The lesson had landed. When the call ended, my inbox exploded. Subject lines like, thank you, I've seen it too, glad someone spoke up, quiet power wins, respect. A message from someone in finance said, I used to think no one noticed the corners being cut. Now I know someone did. You did. Thank you. Another unsigned read. I deleted a file last quarter because she told me it wasn't needed. I still lose sleep over it. You helped me breathe again. Most weren't dramatic. Just small bursts of honesty. Gratitude from people like me. The quiet ones, the watchers. The ones who don't post motivational quotes in Slack or decorate their cubicles with glitter and flair, but who carry the weight, every regulation, every line item, every internal check that keeps the gears from seizing. I sat there for a long time, not proud, not vindicated, just still. This wasn't revenge. This wasn't justice with a theme song. It was the absence of disaster. And sometimes that's the loudest thing you can leave behind. Thanks for watching, you cubicle warriors. Hit that subscribe button. Unless you're my old boss, then you're on your own. Revenge of the coffee pot strikes again.